The echoing trails of history often leave us with questions, especially when it comes to the supernatural. From ancient tombs to shadowy forests, legends of creatures that lurk in the night persist. But what if there were clues hinting that these legends weren't just stories? In the hushed corridors of time, where the line between myth and reality blurs, vampires, those nocturnal beings thirsty for blood, have often whispered secrets into the ears of history. So in this video, we are going to sink our teeth into 5 clues suggesting that vampires might have actually existed. Number 1. Ancient legends. Isn't it eerie how nearly every culture, no matter how isolated, whispers tales of the undead? For example, ancient Greece, a civilization known for its philosophers, warriors, and Olympic Games, also knew something about the night. They spoke of the Varicolochus, beings eerily close to what we'd call vampires. It's said these creatures were more bothersome than philosophers debating in the town square. I mean, discussing the nature of existence is one thing. Being worried about your blood being sipped on while you sleep? That's an entirely different concern. Moving a bit eastward, we land in Eastern Europe. Here, the tales of the Strigoi sends chills down the spine. These undead souls said to rise from their graves don't just give you a creepy stare. They might invite themselves for a midnight snack, and trust me, you don't want to be on their menu. Then there's China, where folklore speaks of the jiangshi, hopping vampires with a penchant for life force. Now, with legends scattered across the globe, one has to wonder, why would so many diverse cultures tell similar tales if there wasn't a speck of truth to them? Perhaps these tales aren't just stories whispered to scare children. Number 2. Historical figures. History is teeming with tales of valor, romance, and mystery, but some figures stand out, casting shadows much longer and darker than their peers. Their stories, intertwined with legends of bloodlust and the macabre, make us question, were there real-life vampires walking among us? Take for instance Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad III. Beyond the borders of his 15th century Wallachian reign, he's better known as the haunting inspiration behind Bram Stoker's Dracula. This prince, with his unnerving fondness for impaling enemies, paints a picture of someone who didn't merely relish power, but perhaps had an appetite for something more sinister. The tales of his cruelty, where rivers of blood flowed through his battlegrounds, evoke images of a ruler not entirely human. Venture a bit forward in time and you'll stumble upon Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian noblewoman whose very name sends chills down the spine. She wasn't just a countess by title, but was dubbed the Blood Countess by those who whispered about her ghastly beauty rituals. Legends claim she bathed in the blood of young girls, believing it would grant her eternal youth. Now, if this doesn't echo vampiric obsession, I don't know what does. Then there's Geodes, a French nobleman and one-time companion of Joan of Arc. While his military accomplishments are well documented, it's the shadowy tales of his later life that evoke terror. Stories describe his unspeakable acts against children and dark rituals. Some suggest he sought the elixir of life, and others hint at a thirst for blood. These historical figures, with tales so dark and behaviors so unsettling, blur the line between human and vampire. As their stories have passed from one generation to the next, the line separating fact from folklore, history from horror becomes increasingly faint. One can't help but wonder if in the heart of all these tales lies a tiny kernel of truth, a truth way terrifying to fully confront. Number 3. Arno Pale. In the 18th century, in the region of Medvedja, Serbia, there was a man named Arno Pale. His tale would stir panic, lead to a series of exhumations, and even catch the attention of official military investigations. Before settling in Medvedja, Pale served as a soldier and claimed to have been tormented by a vampire during his time in the Ottoman Empire. Trying to rid himself of this curse, Pale revealed that he consumed soil from the vampire's grave and smeared himself in his blood. Whether this act was a desperate attempt at protection or a ritual of purification, it was clear that Pale believed himself to be deeply affected by his vampire encounter. Upon returning to Medvedja, Pale lived a relatively normal life, that is, until his sudden death after a fall from a hay wagon. Within weeks of his passing, villagers began to whisper about seeing Pale in their dreams. Even more distressing, several people fell mysteriously ill and died. The cause of their death? Many believed it was the nocturnal visitations of Pale, now turned vampire. The local populace, consumed by fear, decided to exhume Pale's body 40 days after his death. Witnesses, which reportedly included local officials, were shocked to find Pale's corpse relatively undecomposed with fresh blood at his mouth. This, of course, was seen as irrefutable evidence of vampirism. In an act of desperation, the villagers drove a stake through his heart, leading to an outpour of blood, and subsequently burned the body to ensure Pale won't rise again. But the story didn't end there. Following this act, several other bodies were exhumed, including those who had recently died, revealing similar vampiric signs. They too were staked and burned. The panic surrounding Pale's case was so intense that it reached the ears of the Austrian authorities, who then controlled Serbia. Alarmed by the accounts, they dispatched military surgeons to investigate the events in Medvida. The result was an official report that both acknowledged the events and expressed skepticism, attributing the phenomena to natural causes. However, this explanation did little to quell the fear. The tale of Arno Pale, while rooted in 18th century Serbia, spread like wildfire throughout Europe, fueling the vampire hysteria and reinforcing the already deeply entrenched belief in the undead. Number 4. The Vampire of Chilakovitz. Nestled near the scenic banks of the Elbe River, the Czech town of Chilakovitz carries more than just picturesque views. It's also home to one of the most mysterious archaeological finds that seem to echo ancient fears of the undead. In 1966, archaeologists delved into the depths of a Bronze Age grave near Chilakovitz, expecting to uncover remnants of everyday prehistoric life. Instead, they stumbled upon something startling. A male skeleton believed to be around 3,000 years old, with a wooden stake driven through its chest. This manner of burial immediately piqued curiosity. The use of a stake, especially through the heart, bears eerie similarities to later European vampire legends. So was this man feared by his community, that they believed that unless anchored to the earth, he might rise and pose a threat to the living? I say if he was already dead, better safe than sorry. Finally, the Venetian Vampire. The serene waterways of Venice hold many secrets, but in 2009, on the island of Nazareto Nuovo, archaeologists unearthed a chilling discovery that would reignite ancient fears and beliefs. Amidst a mass grave, likely a result of the 16th century plague outbreaks, lay the remains of a woman with an unusual and striking feature: a brick jammed forcibly into her mouth. This startling image evoked whispers of vampirism, leading the media to dub her the Venetian Vampire. But why a brick in the mouth? Wasn't it supposed to be a stake? As researchers delved into historical records and folklore, a pattern began to emerge. The act of placing a brick or stone in the mouth of the deceased was believed to prevent the dead from returning to harm the living. It specifically stopped these vampires from spreading pestilence or chewing on their shrouds, which was a common belief associated with the undead during medieval times in Europe. So as dusk envelops our world and the silent night takes over, remember the legends. These stories passed down through generations might not just be tales to ward off the curious. They might be our ancestors' way of warning us. Vampires, as unusual as they sound, might have once stalked the very land we call home. And while we chuckle at the thought today, maybe, just maybe, there's a reason we still lock our doors at night. And maybe don't pass on the garlic bread. And until our next intriguing tale of history mystery with a bit of comedy, stay curious, everybody.